Wood's grist mill was built by John Wood in 1838. John Wood came from out east, out of Massachusetts, built a sawmill, and then the following year he built a grist mill. The Park Board acquired Deep River in the late 60s because this was the only remaining mill in Lake County. In order to build the mill, you need wood. And so he built the sawmill and started clearing land. Also, it provided a good bit of revenue for him in terms of selling lumber to settlers. The sawmill that exists now is a recreation of what might have been here. To build the sawmill, we followed the drawings out of Oliver Evans' book, did some research on other mills of that variety, visited a few.
I'd always been interested in all the antique, the way our forefathers built stuff, but I'd never really had any idea of just how much work it was until I got involved. There's no metal fasteners in here. Back then they didn't have nails as you know them. They were all handmade. They didn't have nuts and bolts, so they used pegs. It's a wooden peg that's about 1.25 inches in diameter. Starts out as a square peg, driving it to a round hole. We had the peg maker, if you want to call it that, set up, and the kids made a lot of them. There's probably, I don't know, probably 300, 350 pegs in here. All of them were made by the kids. A lot of them, then they would make the pegs at the sugar shack, and I'd be over here putting whatever up and need a peg. Well, they would bring it over, and a lot of the pegs that are in here are signed by the school kids. Back in, I don't know, I guess that'd have been about 1990, somewhere in there. Yeah, it was a big deal. You have mortise and tenon, and then you have half dovetails and box dovetails. It's all the terminology that they would have used, that once you had everything cut with a mortise and tenon, for example, you would slide the two pieces together and then you would drill a hole through it. That's where the wooden pegs come in. Instead of driving it through and putting a bolt in, you drive the peg through, and then that would tighten up the joint and not let it slip. And that's how they put everything together. Everything in here is put together with pegs. That's the technology that they would have used then. We knew it was going to work. We knew that the saw was going to work like we wanted it to. But it was a lot of pride. I take a lot of pride in when we started it up that day that we didn't have to fool with it. Very few adjustments to be made, that it actually cut wood like it was supposed to. And it felt really good.
There never was a water wheel on the mill. That was added for artistic reasons and to represent what a mill might be like. People often view grist mills as having to have a water wheel. That's not always the case. A water wheel, a turbine, a steam engine, diesel engine, and now the electric motors that we use, they're all just forms of power. John Wood's mill was powered by water using what's known as a tub wheel. A tub wheel is a horizontal water wheel with a shaft running through it vertically that attaches directly to the stone. If you think of a water wheel sitting on its side, the water is directed down through a chute, hits it on its side, and it spins, and as it spins, it turns the wheel. We could assume that he milled wheat into flour, would be his primary thing, rye, maybe corn, but corn doesn't make bread, wheat does. So obviously he was probably grinding wheat into flour.
There was a time when Nathan and George Wood ran the grist mill, bought it from their father, and they ran it for many, many years. Nathan bought out his brother George and built the building we have today in 1876. This building still stands and will probably stand for many, many more years. Restored by the Lake County Parks Department in 1976 when the building was 100 years old.
The current mill, what we call Wood's Historic Grist Mill, was built by John's son Nathan in 1876. You would call it a 3-story brick structure, but actually there are 4 working floors. You have to include what you might call the basement as one of the working floors of the building. When the mill was acquired by the Park Department, it was basically empty. Most everything that was in the mill had been sold off in the 40s for scrap for the war effort. So it basically was nothing more than a shell. In 1991, we bought the interior of a mill in Virginia, and we brought back pieces of equipment, and you'll see some of those in the mill also. Some of the pieces we brought back from Virginia, from the Whitaker Mill, have been restored and are in Wood's Grist Mill. We have a roller mill on the first floor. We have a couple of flour dressers next to the millstones. We have some sifters up on the third floor. And so we have about half a dozen pieces that we restored and placed throughout the mill. The stones we have are about 4-foot diameter. They're made out of solid granite, and there's a top stone and a bottom stone. The bottom stone is the bed stone. It's about 6-8 inches thick. Top stone, the runner stone is 12 inches in thickness. They're solid. They're about a ton a piece, and the top stone turns on the bottom stone and actually cuts the grain. There is a pattern on the face of each stone known as the dress, and it's a series of grooves called furrows that, as the top runner stone turns on top of the bottom stone, it actually acts as a series of scissors and cuts the grain finer and finer until it ends up as flour or meal. John Wood probably built his mill here because, first of all, you need water for a mill. This was a nice stream. He acquired the land, built it here. He also built the mill on what was then Sauk Trail. Sauk Trail was the Indian trail that ran from Joliet to Detroit that the Native Americans would travel every year to pay their tributes to the British during the colonial period. John was on the first survey commission in Lake County and had the first county road go on Sauk Trail right in front of his mill, which helped his business. But that road became eventually Old Lincoln Highway, which went from coast to coast, later to be replaced by US 30. There are accounts of people going out to California in 1849 for the gold rush, stopping at Wood's Mill to get flour and staples on their way west.
Also in the town of Deep River, one of the most stately homes is Nathan Wood's home, which he built sometime between 1850 and 1870, approximately the same time he built the brick mill. That house is a grand home, and that's what it was called for the time it was built. It is now owned by the Lake County Parks Department, and they are in the process of entertaining ideas and plans for that home.
What's really important in visiting Wood's Mill at Deep River County Park is this does represent the first industrial site in Lake County. So in a county that is known for its steel mills and refineries and all the industry up along the lake, this is the very first industry in Lake County. You don't often see it that way because you see a quaint, picturesque mill, but in the 1830s and 1840s, that was major industry. We've restored it, made it nice. I've always said it would be like going up to USX in about 200 years and there would be flower beds in front of the blast furnace. That's kind of what we've done. But it does represent the first industrial site in Lake County, and it is an area that has a wealth of history, and there's also a lot of science that you could learn in a mill because it is full of machinery. There's more to learn than just John Wood came here in 1838. There is the tie to the agriculture and how you grow grain and turn it into food. There's the science and technology of levers and wheels and pulleys, and it all gets wrapped up in this building.